Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for an Ask Me Anything with Alberta New Democrat leader Naheed Nenshi. I'm your host, Amanda Chapman, MLA for Calgary-Beddington and Shadow Minister for Education. We're so grateful for you taking the time out of your evening to join us so that we can talk about an issue that is deeply important and currently under threat: education. There's so much I could say about the state of education, and I know you have a lot to say too, Naheed, but tonight we want to hear from you. Over the next hour, we'll be answering your questions about class sizes, book bans, whatever's on your mind. We'll be choosing many of our questions from the live YouTube chat, so please do throw your questions in there. We've also received many pre-submitted questions through our website, so we are going to be answering as many of those as we can. Now, before we dive in, Naheed, anything you want to say to get us started?
Well, first of all, thanks, Amanda, for being here, and thanks to all of you for joining us. It's a hectic first week of school, and so we're thrilled that you're able to join us. But first of all, Amanda, how did day one go? I saw your picture, the 3 kiddos on their back to school picture. Looked pretty awesome, though I was kind of horrified at how old they are now.
Yeah, well, you know, I think when I met you, my oldest was still just a twinkle in my eye, so.
I feel like you were pregnant on the first campaign we worked on together.
I was, yes, yeah. I was. Yeah, and actually, you know what? My kids had a great first week back at school, and that's all thanks to their teachers. They felt welcomed in their classrooms. One of my kiddos started junior high. For the first time, new school, and I'm amazed at how much extra work that teachers do to bring that school spirit. He's already at school, after school, doing clubs, joining sports teams. It's already starting, if you can believe that. So yeah, it's it's a lot in the first week, but really so grateful to the teachers who are making it a pleasant experience.
You know, I saw my niece on the way here, and the very first thing she said to me is, "I don't think I like grade 11."
Oh no.
So I'm sure things will settle down and get better, but my other niece just started grad school, so this one's at home alone for the first time. Well, she's an only child, as she tells me now. Dealing with grade 11, but you know, it is the first week, it is hectic, and you know, I was one of those kids who always wanted to go back to school. I was always excited to go back to school, and I worry that people are just not there now the same way. I don't know if you did this, Amanda, but I went to deliver donuts to teachers when they came back to school last week, which is sort of a politician thing to do. It's usually good fun. You wish people a great school year and so on. It was no fun. You know, I went to a bunch of schools in my riding in Edmonton, and people were really upset. They'd have tough staff meetings with this new legislation coming into place. Everything from, you know, forcing girls over the age of 12, not the boys, just the girls, to prove their sex if they even want to try out for a school team. Of course, we're a bit cheeky here with all these books. But in Edmonton, you know, they got the book ban that they were all freaked out about. In fact, most of the teachers were just packing up their private collection of books they keep in their office and saying, "I'm just taking them home." And one of them was horrified because, in fact, not only were they not allowed to have the books themselves, but if a kid showed up at school with The Handmaid's Tale, it had to be confiscated. So that's all been on pause right now, but it's all a mess. But in addition to that, probably the worst thing I heard from a teacher was a guy who said, "Look, I've spent my entire day trying to squeeze the 38th chair into my room. There's just not enough room for these kids." So we're in a world where we certainly pay the least for public education per student of any province in Canada, despite being the richest province.
That's right.
Where we think we have the largest class sizes ever. We don't really know because the government doesn't track class sizes, if you can believe it.
Wild.
And of course, the elephant in the room is that no one knows if there's going to be school next week.
Yeah.
Because the teachers could go on strike. And all of this is just creating a system of unbelievable stress at a time where I know, and I'm hearing from a lot of parents, They already have a bunch of stress.
Yeah.
Forget the getting the bedtime sorted and figuring out how to pack lunches again. My least favorite thing.
Yeah.
But
that.
also, school supplies are so expensive. School instructional fees have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
After the summer, people are feeling tapped out financially, and then all this other stress. And I just go, gee, I hope there's still kids who are excited about going back to school.
Well, the kids are excited. The parents who have to buy the 3 new pairs of winter boots are maybe a little bit less excited. But yeah.
Don't say winter boots, Amanda.
You buy them in September, Naheed. Get ahead of it.
I buy them when the holes are in the old ones, which could happen at any time. Shall we get to some questions?
Yeah, no, I
All
think
right.
that's a great idea. So we've got our first question now. It comes from Tess in Sherwood Park.
All right.
So Tess says the province just invested an $8 billion surplus into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. And Tess is all in favor of adding to this fund. She wonders, why wasn't that money put towards hiring teachers and EAs to help out in the overcrowded classrooms we have?
Well, I would answer that question, and I'll start, and then feel free to jump in on this one, Amanda. I would answer the question with a simple political statement, which is this government's real bad with money. They predicted a $5.5 billion surplus. It ended up being more than 8, close to $9 billion. This coming year, we're in the year now because it starts in April, they were predicting a $6 billion deficit. Now it's going to be $8 billion or more. Danielle Smith is actually the first premier since Don Getty to increase our reliance on oil and gas revenues instead of aiming for diversification. But the issue, Tess, that you're raising is an important one. How do we set our priorities? I want to save money. I want the Heritage Trust Fund to increase and keep its investments so that it can become an investment source for us in the future. But I also want to make sure that we don't have the lowest per student funding in the country, that teachers are paid fairly, that we're hiring teachers, that we're building schools. It's all a sense of priorities. If we flip over to the healthcare system, the government won't give us the figures, but we know that this new 4 pillars plus 5 different organizations, AHS is being replaced by 9 organizations, all of which have their own CEO, their own costs, their own management. And I guarantee you that when the numbers come out, we will see that the cost of administration in the new healthcare system is 4 to 5 times as much as the current healthcare system, at least double. So what a lot of people would not know is that, when the NDP were in power, neither of us were at that table, but when they were in power, they were criticized for increasing spending. Well, Danielle Smith has increased spending in 2 years by more than Rachel Notley increased it in 4 years. But when Rachel Notley increased it, we indexed AISH. People were seeing benefits. We were investing in healthcare and education. And I think it would be hard to find an Albertan today who says, wow, that extra $10 billion you're spending every year, I'm really feeling that in better services, because they're not.
Yeah. One of Rachel Notley's greatest achievements, I think, was cutting child poverty in half.
Yeah.
That was the kind of investments that an NDP government was making.
Well, it's a great example, right? Because some might say, oh, well, you're just spending money on social programs and that sort of thing. But in reality, these things can be real investments. So along with the federal government at the time and the creation of the Canada Child Benefit and really focusing our spending in Alberta on people who really needed it, the NDP government did in fact cut child poverty in half, which means that families can breathe a little bit easier, because child poverty is family poverty, right?
Yeah.
It means families can breathe a little bit easier. They might be able to invest a little bit in going back to school, in education, in starting a business, in trying to improve their own financial circumstances a little bit. So these are kinds of investments that make real sense. Spending $100 million on Tylenol that nobody wanted or needed or will use is not an investment that makes sense. Man, can you imagine what $100 million would have done in terms of hiring teachers and education assistants?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to go to our next question. We've got quite a few here we want to try to get through.
That's code for shut up and let me get to the questions. All right, I got it.
All right, this one's coming from Aaron in Airdrie. Hello, Naheed and Amanda. Thank you for hosting this forum. We live in Airdrie, where my son's school is facing extreme overcrowding.
Sure.
The entire school system here had to be restructured, shifting grades between schools in an attempt to ease the extreme enrollment pressures. My son attends a Cole Edwards in Airdrie, formerly a K-5 school. Grade 6 has now been added to the school. And his school has even had to convert the library and a music room into classrooms. My son's grade 4 class, oh my goodness, has 56 students.
I'm sorry, what?
56 students.
In grade 4?
In grade 4.
Wow.
And not enough desks. There are no educational assistants or aides available to help with children in his class who have individual learning plans and varying levels of disabilities. So, how does the Alberta NDP plan to address the immediate demand for classrooms and space?
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'm just hoping your son has a good school year, because what ends up happening, and you referred to the students with the individual learning plans, the ILPs. So it's not just that classrooms are huge, they're increasingly complex. And what happens there is the students who have special learning needs are not getting the assistance they need. There's not enough education assistance. It had been and still is such a poorly paid job. It's hard to attract people into it. But also, the students who don't have particularly specialized needs are suffering as well, because their teacher just doesn't have enough time for them when they're spending time with others. And I've heard so many stories from teachers and parents about this. You know, the 36 student grade 3 classroom that I thought was pretty big, where one student had to be within arm's reach of an adult at all times, but the teacher was the only adult in the room. There was no EA. So she was spending fully half of her time with one student, not the other 35 students in the room. Nobody's learning well there. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And, you know, there are many, many, many things we need to do to improve the overall experience in schools. But, you know, I'll start with a couple of basic things. The first is principles. Peter Naheed believed that we should have the best public education system in the world. I'm a little bit older than you, Amanda. Not that much older, although she looks much younger.
Okay, now, yeah.
But when I graduated from high school, we could clearly say that Alberta students ranked among the top in the world.
Yeah.
And as recently as 2018, which is the last year that I have seen it's called PISA, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's the International Student Assessment,
Yes.
ISA, I don't know what the P
yeah.
is. We were ranked in the top 5 in the world in Alberta.
Yeah.
And since then, we plummeted. Last year, they canceled the PATs, the Provincial Achievement Tests, for some students because they knew the students were going to do very badly. And I haven't seen the full results, but I've heard horrifying stories from parents and teachers about the PATs, especially the grade 6 PATs with the new curriculum this year. So step one, the math especially. So step one, let's go back to that ambition. Let's go back to saying our public system needs to be the very best public system in the world. And then let's figure out how to fund it, both operationally and capital-wise. So you remember, Amanda, when I was elected leader a year ago, in the middle of the summer, the government announced a huge program to build new schools. And I remember I was stopped on the street by a bunch of TV cameras asking for comments about this, because they knew where I was. And I actually said, listen, credit where credit is due. This is a generational investment in schools. It's too late. Why are they announcing it now instead of in their budget 6 months ago? It's because they're seeing a new threat politically, but I'll take the money. But as you well know, because you analyzed it in great detail, in the budget that they released in April, do you remember how much money was in there for construction of these new schools under the School Accelerator Program, the Accelerator Program?
Yeah.
Want to tell them?
Well, there was none.
The answer is zero. They announced it and they didn't put any money behind it for 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? There's just planning for 3 years.
And you know, I've talked to many school boards. They have shovel-ready projects.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not that they're not ready to go on schools.
Well, that's
they
right.
just need the money.
So there are things we can do to streamline that process. You know, for example, the elementary school that I went to in Calgary, there are several elementary schools across the city that are the same plan. And yes, I know communities have special needs and so on, but we got to get this faster.
Yeah.
When we're designing every school from scratch, we have 3 years of planning money, no building money. I think every parent in the city in the province would say, just give me a school.
Yeah.
And if it's a cookie cutter school or very similar to another school, we'll take it. So there are really practical things we can do to speed up the planning and construction. We can work with cities to deal with the red tape. We did a lot of work when I was mayor of Calgary with the school boards to ensure that we were jointly planning our lands. One of the things we talked a lot about is how there shouldn't be single-purpose schools anymore, but in newer communities, the school can be co-located with seniors housing or a fire department.
Yeah.
But the rules and regulations just don't allow for that. So we can streamline that, make that a way better. We need to attract more teachers. I saw a stat, I don't know if it's true, so don't quote me on it, but that up to 40% of teachers in Alberta now are leaving the profession in their first 5 years.
50%.
50?
I believe that's what the ATA said in their recent pressers.
I had seen 40 somewhere,
Yeah.
but so obviously you can't, if you got a hole in your bucket,
Yeah.
no matter how much you fill the bucket, you can't keep it sane. So we got to make sure that the classroom conditions are such that we're attracting young people, that they want to teach, that teachers want to stay. I was told don't tell too many stories tonight because we want to get to lots of questions, but I'm going to tell one. Last year I met a teacher. She was in her second or third year of teaching. And she just told me the story of her school. She's an elementary school teacher. And she said the principal gave us a presentation this year on the budget. And the first page of the first slide of the PowerPoint presentation said, "No one is coming to save you." Can you imagine? So she just looked at me and she said, "You know what? I'm still young. I could go back to school. I could take my teaching degree and go work in HR or corporate training, or I could get another degree. I don't have kids yet, so I've got some flexibility. Why am I in this profession?" And I didn't have an answer for her. The only thing I could say is, instead of saying, "No one is coming to save you," all I can say is, we need a new government, man. But if we have that, then I can tell you confidently that help is on the way.
We've got a question now from Facebook Live. Ribsy says, "Hello and thanks, teacher here. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I'm having a hard time making ends meet these days. Everything is more expensive. My mortgage rates are rising by $450 next month.
Wow.
What will the NDP do to help teachers with their questions for wage recovery? Thanks again for taking my question."
Well, thanks very much. I'm happy to talk about anything tonight. That's why we call it an Ask Me Anything. And maybe I'll broadly speak about the issues around cost of living that are affecting everyone. I could say, well, if you get your deal, hopefully the teachers will get paid a little more fairly. But the issues you're talking about really are facing everyone. And when we talk to Albertans, affordability and cost of living are always in the top 2 or 3 issues province-wide. And so when we think about these issues, we have to think about what's in our control. And there are things that are under our control. So in particular, the provincial government has direct control over 3 issues. The first is utilities. The second is insurance, particularly auto insurance. And the third, they don't have complete control, but they really have the ability to do good work in housing. And I think in all 3 of those areas, we have better ideas than the current government does. So, the utility rates, anyone who pays their bill knows, under the UCP when they first started, quadrupled. They went up by 400% because the UCP didn't like the system that the New Democrats had designed. They changed it. There was a massive loophole in it. There was incredible profiteering and profit taking. They've more or less closed that loophole, but you're still paying 50 or 60% more than you were paying when the New Democrats were in power. On auto insurance, we've got amongst the highest auto insurance in Canada. The UCP came up with this great plan that they were going to increase your insurance only by 7.5% a year. So it would go up by only 15% to make it from the highest in Canada to the highest in Canada. And then it might go down a little bit, not the full 15%, but a little bit. But you would lose the right to sue if you were catastrophically hurt in an accident. And over the summer, you may have missed this. Minister Horner, the finance minister, actually, or was it Mr. Neudorf? One of them, Minister Neudorf is the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, but one of them announced that, in fact, we're probably not going to see any savings once they put in this no-fault system. And probably your insurance will increase by more than 7.5% last year because the poor insurance companies are having a rough go of it. And then finally on housing, this government really has not done anything to increase the supply of housing. The cities have done a pretty good job on this. The federal government has done a pretty good job on this. The province has not been a good partner. They're leaving money on the table. They're not building the affordable housing that's needed to ease supply pressures and bring down the cost for everyone. So there's a lot of things we can do. And one really minor thing, it's not minor, it's actually a big deal. People talk to me all the time about the price of groceries. And I've been thinking to myself, what can we do on the price of groceries? We can certainly encourage agriculture. We can encourage local buying and all that sort of thing. But there's one thing that really irritates me, Amanda, and I think it irritates everybody. My Kraft singles used to have 24 slices, and now they have 20, which is a 20% reduction in the size. Yeah. It's called shrinkflation. Yeah. And there are jurisdictions across the world that have regulations preventing shrinkflation. And believe it or not, under the old constitutional act in Alberta, the province does have some control over weights and measures.
Oh, really?
And so one of our colleagues later this legislative season, if we get to him, I hope we will be introducing a motion that Alberta should be doing something on shrinkflation.
Oh, that's really excellent. Yeah, I mean, I'm shopping, grocery shopping for a family of 5 with 2 teenagers. So any action that we could take on groceries, it would just be, I'd be so grateful.
Well, and the other
for
thing is
family
we've
budget.
also got to work with the federal government on some of this stuff because a lot of this stuff is federal regulation, but the provinces can influence it. You know, and as we all know, the UCP doesn't like to sit down with other people. They don't like to make deals. They just like to fight all the time. And then they leave opportunities and money and opportunities to help people on the table, which is very frustrating for everyone.
They sure do. They could use a kindergarten refresher class, I think. We've got a YouTube Live question now. So, question is, what can we do as parents to actually drive change here? We can say that we support teachers, put up lawn signs, but none of this drives change. How do we make a real difference?
So I'm going to start with a very political answer. And remember, my whole life has been about civic engagement, getting people more involved in their communities. That's what I did professionally before I got into politics. That's what I tried to do in my 15 years in public life, is empower people and give them voice. And I do have some ideas on how to do that. But at first, the very political answer. Folks, if you want change, you got to elect a better government. This government is not the government of Peter Lougheed and Ralph Klein. They're not a government that listens, certainly not to the opposition. They're not a government that takes ideas or suggestions and makes things better. You know, the stuff on girl athletes is a great example of this. You know, they took a system that was meant to protect young girls, at least that's what they said, and actually turned it into a system that demeans and denigrates young girls by assuming they're not girls unless they prove it. Like, this is just, it just doesn't make sense the way they do it. But there are certainly ways you can get involved. You know, for example, they've paused the book banning. And the reason they paused the book banning is because they were actually embarrassed. Because Margaret Atwood made fun of them, because there were articles on the BBC and Der Spiegel in Germany and the New York Times about the book banning. And they got embarrassed and they pulled back and said, no, that's not what we meant to do. We just wanted to ban 4 LGBTQ comic books, none of which, by the way, were available in elementary schools. Just saying. But you need to make your voice heard. So I'll tell you what you can do. So number 1, join with the parents at your school and make a strong statement to the government of what you believe in. You know, one of the most interesting things for me, and I'm sure you've seen this, Amanda, is parents are so scared about the possibility of a teacher's strike. And I have yet to hear from a single parent who blames the teachers for it. You know, almost, I mean, every single one I've talked to said, no, the teachers are right. We blame the government for this. So you got to make your voices heard. We're so shy. And the school boards have been so neutered by this government exerting power and pressure over them like a bully that they can't say what they need to say. So we need the parents to speak up. Parents are a significant voting bloc. So yeah, the lawn signs help. Writing, or even better, phoning your MLA's office makes a huge difference. Getting your parent councils together to write makes a huge difference. And every one of those letters, copy Amanda, copy me, so that we know what's being said. We will read those in the House. We will bring those to the attention of the government. But it's really, really important for this government that believes that it speaks for a silent majority to know how upset parents are and to help understand that they've got to make some changes and that we don't buy what they're selling.
Yeah.
The government, all governments do this, but this government is particularly bad for it. They think we're not going to notice. They treat us sort of like we're dumb. And it's really important to say, we see you, we understand you. But in the end, what's really going to make a difference here is to tell your friends, you don't have to keep voting for these guys. We deserve better. And better is possible, and a new Democrat government will be better.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add to that is I really wouldn't minimize the value of standing behind teachers and showing them that you are supportive of them.
Yes.
I've talked to so many teachers about this, and they're concerned. They know that a teacher strike is, of course, disruptive for a
Nobody
family
wants
schedule.
one. No teacher wants to go on strike.
No
Yeah.
teacher wants to go on strike. Showing them as a parent that you are behind them, whether that's a lawn sign, sending them a little note in your kid's backpack. I love to drop off treats at school. It's just a great way to just show teachers, yeah, we're here with you. We know that you are standing up for our kids. Don't minimize the value of that. It's really important. We're going to go to our next question here. We've got Penny from Chilliwack, BC. Oh, lovely, Penny, coming to us from across the border. So, as a retired teacher librarian at a secondary school, I'm very concerned and confused with what is going on in Alberta with books. So is Danielle Smith the one banning books, or is it the Edmonton Board of Education? Are they in cahoots? I saw a clip where Danielle Smith says she's angry with the Edmonton Board for making this list. As a British Columbian, who do I believe? It's not up to politicians to ban books. It's an interesting.
Oh boy, Amanda. Should I do the whole story? I think I should do the whole story.
Dive on in.
I really can get ahead of steam on this one, folks. But here we go. Oh, I'm going all the way there, Amanda. Stop me if I'm going too far. Whenever Premier Smith and the UCP need to distract from their record, the thing they do, they take all their cues from the right-wing folks in the U.S. The Premier has said that her two political role models are the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, and the former governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, who's now the Secretary of Homeland Security in the U.S. So they've been very clear about where they take their cues from. And anytime they want to distract from their record, they try to ignite a culture war. So months and months and months and months ago, like last winter, November, I think last year, the minister was given a list of books that people thought were inappropriate that were allegedly found on school shelves. He sat on it for months. Then there was a by-election happening, 4 by-elections as a matter of fact, and one of them three, I should say, there have been 4 in total, but 3 at the same time.
Yeah.
And one of them in particular, the UCP thought they could win if they ignited a culture war, if they got religious and more socially conservative parents super angry. They didn't win, by the way. But they tried to ignite a culture war. So suddenly the minister shows up and they start disseminating. Ironically, they keep saying they don't want people to see these images. And they have sent these images out to thousands and thousands of folks
everywhere
to try and get people mad. Images they say no one should see. But in any case, there was some pretty shocking stuff there. And I think you as a mom would probably go, I don't want my little one
to
be seeing that,
not
right?
my elementary kid, for sure.
But instead of just saying, guys, can we make sure these books are for high school kids only, or we just get rid of them off the shelves, these 4 graphic novels?
Yeah.
Let's just do that. Instead, they said, we need a bigger policy. And it took them weeks and weeks, and they drafted a ministerial directive, which you can tell the poor bureaucrats wrote under duress, and or ChatGPT wrote, because it's the shoddiest ministerial directive I've ever seen. It's really explicit. Like, I can't quote the ministerial directive on Facebook, because I'll get flagged. And it talks about specifically what acts constitute explicit sexual conducts.
Wow.
And when I read it, I said, oh no, I know exactly what's going to happen here. And that is, in fact, what happened. So they gave the school boards until October 1st to come up with a policy and a list. And the Edmonton Public School Board said, well, here's a list. 200 books on that list, 9 of which happen to be sitting right by us right now. No, this is our staff members who happen to have these books handy. But, one of them was, of course, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. There was 1984. There was even Danielle Smith's favorite book on the list. And The Color Purple by Alice Walker. Look, this is a harrowing book. Yes. There are awful things that happen in this book that are described quite explicitly. But it doesn't mean it's not an incredible work of literature to help kids understand what it means to dehumanize women and dehumanize women of color.
That's right.
I mean, this is real stuff. And so, yes, the premier said, oh, the Edmonton Public School Board was viciously complying. She meant maliciously complying, which means they were following the orders, but they were doing so when they were mad about it, and maybe they were. But you know what? Thank you, Edmonton Public School Board, because you brought this thing to a head. And then now the premier is embarrassed. The minister is embarrassed. The premier is looking for someone to blame. She says people misunderstood the ministerial order. No, premier. The school board did exactly what the order said. And if your job was you wanted to ban pornographic drawings in high school, I feel like there's always been pornographic drawings in high school.
In the bathroom stall, right?
Right. But if your job was to ban pornographic drawings in high school, specifically LGBTQ ones from 4 particular books, look, I might disagree with you, I might agree with you. There is nobody in the province. You're a parent, I'm an uncle. There's nobody in the province who says materials that are age inappropriate should be available to kids in school.
Yeah,
we all believe this. But you used a sledgehammer to try and ignite a culture war. It didn't work. And then she even said, oh, we'll rewrite it in 2 hours. Don't rewrite it in 2 hours, Premier. Spend the time, talk to experts, get it right. But in the meantime, we need kids to read, and we need kids to be challenged by what they're reading, and we need to make sure that happens. Are you familiar with Dogman?
Yes, we have all the Dogman books.
I am not familiar with Dogman.
I'm a little weirded out by Dogman, right? Because it's like a person body with like a dog head, and I've never fully understood it, but my kids love it.
But it's on one of the ban lists.
Dogman's on the list?
Dogman is on one of the ban lists.
Why is Dogman on the list?
I don't know why, but apparently it teaches empathy and citizenship, so go figure.
No, I do just want to say about the malicious compliance, because as a reader, that's been bugging me all week, folks, that there was no malicious compliance. Right? What's happened is that there was just straight up compliance. Danielle Smith and Education Minister Nicolaides did not understand the rules that they wrote, did not understand that it included written passages, even though all you need to do is read it.
Do you remember, sorry to interrupt you, Amanda,
No.
Do you remember the press conference when the minister announced it?
Yeah.
There's a whole big section in the ministerial order that talks about sexual content that is not problematic. And he talks about puberty and life changes and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And when the minister announced it, he didn't realize that was actually the part of the order that said that's okay.
Yeah.
And so all the first news stories came out and said, you can't read Judy Blume, you can't read Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret.
Yeah.
And then there had to be a retraction that evening going, no, that's not what we meant. So we had the minister not even understanding his own order.
Yeah.
And now they're claiming that they didn't understand it at all. Then why'd you write it? Why'd you sign it? Exactly. The minister had to sign the order.
Yeah.
So let's just get this one right. I happen to believe in the freedom to read.
Yeah.
I happen to believe in the freedom of expression. But if there are legitimate concerns, the world is changing. Societal norms are shifting faster than a lot of folks are comfortable with.
Yeah.
Kids have access to everything on social media. literacy, how to manage dehumanizing content. I'm just going to say it. Every kid has access to straight up hardcore pornography now.
Yeah.
And how to manage that world. This is important stuff.
Now,
and we need to get it right.
As a parent, that is my biggest concern. It's really not about what my kids are going to find in a book. It's what they're going to find online. That is where they're going to find material.
We can't shelter them entirely, but we have to protect kids, absolutely.
100%.
But we also have to train and help kids understand how to navigate information, how to navigate the images they see, how to build healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And this really bugs me, and I'm sorry I'm going on and on about it, but the other thing that really bothers me is part of their anti-trans agenda, they stuck in one other thing, and I should say this as a public service announcement to all the parents watching. You can't opt out of sex ed anymore. You have to opt into sex ed, and not once per year, every single time.
Yeah.
So I'm still old enough that I'm thinking of crumpled up notes in the bottom of kids' backpacks.
Oh, yeah.
I understand it's all on apps and email now.
No, it's not. No,
it's still crumpled up
it
notes?
comes as a paper form. Yeah, I fish them out at the end of the week with the manky old banana and stuff, right? Yeah.
So make sure you're keeping an eye on this stuff and make sure your kids are getting the education that's needed now more than ever. Alberta still has the highest rates of teen pregnancy. We have the highest rates of sexually transmitted infections. So, if you believe in sex ed for your kids, just make sure your kids have access to it, because this government doesn't want them to.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and we should be empowering our kids. Okay, we've got a question now from Sherry in Edmonton. Oh, same topic, great, so we can stick on this. Does the ministerial order for the banning of books also distract from the current government's lack of support for teachers in public education? Yes. Please, Naheed, go ahead.
Look, that's all it is. That's all it is. All this stuff is just a distraction from the real things that are going on. I'll give you another example. So we haven't talked about curriculum in a while, Amanda?
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like that has slid by. But as you know, the previous UCP Premier, Jason Kenney, attempted to put in a curriculum that was copy and pasted from the United States. You learn to spell America before you learn to spell Ontario, just saying. And it was very clearly designed to prevent kids from learning how to be engaged citizens. It was pretty shocking, actually. And look, there are good arguments to be had over whether this way of teaching reading or this way of teaching math makes more sense. And I can totally be convinced by experts that we need to try different things in doing that to make sure our standards stay high. But remember, Alberta kids in those 2018 PISA results had among the highest math and science scores in the world. But the social studies curriculum was problematic. Now, it went back to the drawing board, but it's come back with far less discussion than the last time. And a kindergarten teacher told me this week that part of the kindergarten curriculum is training kids on how the difference between leaders and helpers. That we should follow and help leaders rather than we should learn how to be leaders and we should learn how to lead. This is the distraction, folks. So they think if we're going to be too busy talking about the tiny, tiny, tiny number of trans teenagers in sport, or we're going to be talking about banning The Handmaid's Tale, that we're not going to notice what they're doing in the curriculum. We're not going to notice the PAT scores slipping. We're not going to notice the classroom sizes that they no longer report on. So that's exactly the right question, and the answer is yes, it's all a distraction. None of it is to protect our kids, none of it is to make our schools more safe, and none of it is about making sure that we're getting real student achievement.
Yeah, I think this government does not want us talking about the fact that the first province-wide teacher strike in history is looming over us. Tens of thousands of teachers who are prepared to walk off the job because of their work conditions. I think they'd much rather that we're talking about The Handmaid's Tale than about what is going on for teachers in classrooms right now. We've got Daniel M. from YouTube Live. Daniel asks, what can be taught to teach nuance to our students? Oh, this is an interesting question. To combat polarization in a world where sometimes there is no simple right answer. The world is complicated and requires critical thought.
What an unbelievably beautiful question. Thank you so much for it. And it actually is something that Amanda and I and our colleagues, and I should have shouted out, by the way, a whole bunch of our colleagues are watching going, I have a better answer than him. But we shut off their ability to, no, we did not. They're just being good. But thank you to all the MLAs who I know are online with us today, many of whom are parents themselves.
They are. We have a caucus that cares so deeply about public education in Alberta.
And cares deeply about Albertans. It's one of the great privileges of my life to work with such thoughtful people. And by the way, the first majority female caucus, I think, maybe in Canadian history, but certainly in Alberta history.
Yeah.
But in any case, we spend a lot of our time on this exact issue. Politics these days really doesn't allow for a lot of nuance. And, even for me, deciding to jump into this role, I wore purple my whole life. I still have a purple pocket square my whole political life, because purple symbolizes a combination of red and blue. It symbolizes people coming together in their common humanity, rather than being defined by their tribes or their ideologies. But it's hard. Politics today, media today, social media today want the easy answer, the black and white solution. And when I start talking about gray areas and nuance, I'm accused of being wishy-washy. I'm accused of not standing for anything. I'm accused of being wimpy, right, and not tough. But ultimately, humanity occurs when human beings come together. That's why our theme this whole summer has been Better Together. That's not just about separatism. It's about how in community we stand better when we stand together. And certainly the previous iteration of the curriculum review, which is now 10 years old, talked a lot about nuance and citizenship and bringing people in. And Jason Kenney said that was too ideological, that it was training people to be woke. I'd rather not train people to be asleep myself. But we've got to get to a place where we actually understand one another. But here's the thing. Go visit a high school. Go talk to the students there. And you will find that the kids are all right. That in fact, the kids are way ahead of the grown-ups, the purported grown-ups, and the people in government in understanding that. Anti-LGBTQ bullying, I talked to my niece in grade 11 and I said, do gay kids get bullied at your school? And she had no idea what I was talking about. She was like, how is that even possible? And things have shifted. People are much more accepting. They understand that giving you your freedom to be authentic doesn't take away my freedom to be me. Exactly. And so anyone who fights against that, anyone who tries to pull rigid ideology into young people today is fighting a losing battle. And I just wish the government would figure it out. But as I keep saying, this isn't about making this government better. They ain't going to be better. They might fix a few things on the margins, but they don't have it in them to be better. It is about showing Albertans that we together can be better. And frankly, it's going to take a new government.
Yeah, well, I think you're right about that. We're going to go now to a question from Shauna from Airdrie. The government doesn't seem to understand the complexity and amount of extra needs every teacher is faced with in the classroom today. And the education assistant budgeting piece is inadequate for the number of children presenting at schools who require some individual assistance for their whole day. How can we advocate to achieve better budget allocations for these absolutely required assistants in the classroom?
Thanks so much, Shauna. I want to answer that in two ways. So the first is I do want to talk about your specific question on education assistance. I went and stood on the picket line in Fort McMurray on a actually very nice winter's day. Apparently there'd been a snowstorm on either side of the days that I was there, and I got lucky. It was sunny and a big blue sky. But those education assistants stood on the line this winter for 4 months through a Fort McMurray winter, for about a month in Edmonton. These are the poorest paid public servants in the system. Their average wage was $28,000. And it's no coincidence that it's 85% women.
Exactly.
And one of those workers said to me, she really, really wanted me to understand something. She wanted me to understand that she didn't stumble into this job. It wasn't the only job she could get. She wanted me to understand she went to school, she had a diploma in this, and the day she got hired by the Fort McMurray School Board was the proudest day of her life. And she'd been working there, I've told the story so many times, Amanda, I'm forgetting the details, but I think she'd been working there 27 years.
Wow.
And in that 27 years, she'd received a $7 wage increase. And she said, I can afford to feed my own kids. They can only get one piece of fruit a day. I say to them in the morning, honey, today you can have an apple or an orange, but you can't have both. And these are full-time unionized public servants. The good news is those women standing on the line in Fort McMurray won. They caused this government to back down. They got significant wage concessions that have now been replicated across much of the province.
Yeah.
So let's make sure now that we're attracting people to this job to make it attractive for folks. But there's a whole second piece to this, which is about doing the job. And I want to be very blunt here as well. We have a very significant problem with safety in schools. And too many teachers and EAs are getting punched, bitten, kicked, hurt in the work that they're doing, and we're turning a blind eye to it. Is it because it's a female workforce? Is it because we don't think of this as a real workplace safety issue? I don't know the answer. But what we need to do is understand that having that complexity in the classroom, not having the resources to help folks, is leading to a real problem of safety in schools. And we've got to be able to manage all of this together. And it starts with having the adequate resources so that students can learn in a safe and productive environment.
Yeah, it's the starving of resources, right? Like if you're putting kids in a classroom, it can be an overwhelming situation for a lot of these kids. That's why they need those EAs. They need that one-on-one support, right? These are kids who need help emotionally regulating, right? And they're not getting that. I'm sure you've heard these stories too, Naheed. Classrooms where teachers have an EA for 30 minutes a day.
If they're lucky. I had one that had 1 hour a week.
1 hour a week?
1 hour a week. How does
I'm
that
being
help?
honest, exactly. What is the point at that point? What is the point? If we're not providing the supports kids need, we're not providing the kind of classroom conditions where anyone is going to thrive. All right, we have got a question from Kia in Edmonton now. So Kia asks, we're seeing education cutbacks across the province at every level. At NAIT alone, 18 programs were recently paused, leaving students with debt, but no clear path to finish their studies. Wow. While instructors and staff are losing their jobs. So how is the NDP planning to address the needs of both students who have been left stranded and educators whose livelihoods are on the line?
Thanks so much for that. And I'm actually really glad we got a question in about post-secondary education.
Yeah.
Because that's another important part of the puzzle. And Shadow Minister of Advanced Education, Dave Egan, is not with us today, but he could tell you a lot about some of these challenges. So this all starts, I shouldn't say starts, but a big root of all of this was the 2019 budget of Jason Kenney, the first UCP budget, which had the largest cut to post-secondary education in Alberta's history. Now, by the way, I happened to be on the Board of Governors of the University of Calgary as a student leader when I was president of the Students' Union, when we had the second largest cut. In Ralph Klein's first term to post-secondary education, we had to deal with a 21% cut. That cut in 2019 averaged to about 23%. So to give you some context, the budget of the University of Calgary was cut by almost the entire budget of Mount Royal University. So they basically took a university out of Calgary in doing those cuts. So the administrators and the folks at the university had little choice but to start cutting programs and to start, they couldn't, the tuition was still capped, so they couldn't put it all in tuition. But now, public funding for post-secondary in Alberta is far below 50% of the budgets of these universities, for all, and colleges and polytechs. So for all intents and purposes, we've privatized the system. And yet the government still wants to exert control. So for example, this fall, they've signaled that they're going to put in legislation to get rid of wokeness at universities. Because again, Ron DeSantis, whatever he does, she wants to do. Again, these are not priorities. The priorities are exactly what Kea points out.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the big challenges now is that the federal government made a huge mistake with international students. And I could go on and on about the nature of the mistake and what they did. But essentially, you had a whole giant influx of international students because they pay higher tuition than domestic students. the colleges and universities had a real incentive to bring in more international students to make up the government funding shortfall. And thankfully, most in Alberta, many of those students went to good public colleges and universities. In other parts of the country, they went to, what I call strip mall diploma mills. We still have those here, but not quite as much. But now that the federal government has really cut back on international students, programs are being closed because there's no more students to take them, leaving people stuck midstream. So a good example of that is here at Bow Valley College in Calgary. Bow Valley College is a hero institution. They do amazing work, a lot of it for newcomers to Canada.
Yeah.
But now they've closed down their English language learning programs. I have a friend myself who is one of those people you talk to who lost their job when the program was gone. But the need is still there. And so ultimately we have to figure out how we bridge the folks who are already here, fulfill the promise we made to them to get a proper education, and to help those workers figure out ways that they can still continue to work in the system. Because we need advanced education probably more than ever in order to get this right. But right now, as far as I can tell, the provincial government has no real plan for post-secondary education. They've set up another one of these commissions with the same sort of usual suspects who always sit on these commissions.
Force. They love a task force.
They love a task force, and usually they hide the results.
Yeah.
But Professor Jack Mintz, Dr. Mintz, is the chairing that task force. We know how he thinks about things. He's not exactly a wallflower, so we kind of know what the task force is going to say.
Yeah.
More workforce-related stuff. More focus within universities and so on. But let's see what happens. Let's see if they actually come up with a plan for post-secondary education. In the meantime, let's actually look after the people who are left out in the lurch that we need to help right now, because right now the government's just ignoring them, whether international or domestic students.
Yeah, that's right. Have you looked up how much it would cost to get your degree if you were to take it now? I have a kid who's approaching the post-secondary years. And so
I think you and I have the same degree.
We
so
do have the same bachelor's degree.
We both have the same Bachelor of Commerce from the UC.
From Haskayne School of Business. $50,000. $50,000.
I'm feeling so old. I want to say it was $588 a semester when I started. But, on a serious note, right? I came from a very poor family.
Yeah, me too. My
sister had to take out student loans to do her pharmacy degree at the University of Alberta. As for me, I had scholarships and bursaries, but I also never worked fewer than 4 to 5 part-time jobs at the same time while I was in university. I worked in a shopping mall selling lottery tickets on the weekend. I always had a research or a TA ship on campus. I worked in student services with international students and new students. I would pick up a shift here and there doing, event work. I was never a bartender, but doing
I
event
was a bartender,
work.
a theater bartender.
Oh, they don't tip well.
Well, no, they don't. No, they don't.
But in any case, I don't know how a student could do that today.
No.
I think even if you cobble together those jobs, we now, as of October 1, will have the lowest minimum wage in Canada. I don't know how you cobble that together the way we used to. And we have to understand that for a kid like me, post-secondary education was my ticket out. Right? It was my ticket to success. And we need to make sure that all the kids, I spoke at the graduation at Lester B. Pearson High School, which is Northeast Calgary, working class neighborhood, this spring. And it was so great to see all those kids with limitless potential. But, more than one of them said to me, I got to take a gap year or two and try and save up some money before I can go to school. And if you lose the motivation to go to school just because you can't afford it, it's a big challenge. And I haven't seen this government even recognize that, let alone try to address it.
Yeah, you're right. All right, we've got another question from YouTube Live from Colin. Can we also talk about how girls over 12 years old now have to prove they were born female to participate in school sports? Just girls.
Just girls, not boys.
Just girls.
Again, this is what happens when you have culture war stuff managing your policy. Did we have a huge problem with trans girl athletes beating up other girls on their team, causing injuries, getting girls to not win the medals that they rightly deserved because they were competing against them in Alberta in high school? Dude, no, we did not. And look, there's some real concerns, and I've talked to lots of girl dads. you're married to a girl dad, right, who said, listen, I'm legit concerned about this. You know, what if there is someone on the other team who's bigger, who bowls my kid over? Look, I get it. Your kids are the most important thing, and you want to keep them safe.
Of course.
But this is how this backfired, right? So instead of figuring out if there was really a problem, dealing with it on a case-by-case basis as needed, they developed a broad sweeping policy that assumes that every 12-year-old girl is lying about her sex and has to prove it to you. And there's actually even worse than that. There's an anonymous whistleblower system. So imagine if you're a bit of a tomboy, if that's still a term I can use, or maybe you're just big and strong and you want to play, girls soccer, right? Any parents on the other team can say, I think that's actually a boy. And then you have to prove your sex. And we don't know how you have to prove your sex because you'll already have filled out a form.
Well, it's not just the birth certificate. That's the thing.
And it's not, you can't show your birth certificate because the birth certificate can be changed. You have to go back and find your registration of birth. Do you know where the registration of birth is for your three kids?
I have no idea. No idea how I would find that.
And me neither, even my own. But the thing is that what was meant to protect girls from a largely overblown threat is now being used to vilify girls. This is where it all starts, folks. This isn't an unintended consequence. This is a consequence anyone could have foreseen. But the government didn't care. They had to score their political points. And by the way, the number of sports girl dads I've heard from in the last 2 weeks saying to me, what now? And I say, but isn't that what you were advocating? And they say, not this, which is exactly the problem.
Yeah, that's right. We've got a question from Anna from YouTube Live. How would you approach inclusive education? I'm a second-year teacher in grade 1. We have many complex students that need one-to-one support all day. 13 complexities in 5 rooms, but just 3 EAs.
Well, at least you have 3. But 3 for 13. 3 on 13. I mean, look, this is a question, and one of the things about me as a politician is I'm very honest, and so I'm going to be very honest. This is a question I've been grappling with that I do not have an answer to. And luckily, I have a brilliant shadow minister who's thought about this as well. But ultimately, we have to have a serious grown-up conversation about how every single student can succeed and where inclusive education is succeeding and where we see gaps. And I've never heard the government, or frankly, even the NDP government back in 2015, really start to talk about this question. But it's something I'm increasingly hearing from students, from parents, and from teachers. I don't know the right answer. I'm not an expert. But I do know that the right thing to do is to go to the experts, to go to the people with lived experience and figure out the model that makes sense for everyone, that makes sure every single student achieves, that every single student has a life of dignity and authenticity, and that every single student can thrive. And I'm willing to talk about what that looks like. Do you want to add to that,
Well,
Amanda?
I mean, it is a really nuanced conversation.
Back to the previous
Naheed,
question.
And, agreed. Like, it's somewhere where we would want to be engaging with experts. We'd, of course, want to be talking to parents. I remember when I was in school, of course, complex kiddos were in a separate classroom.
Or a separate school.
That's right. And it was under Ralph Klein is when inclusion in education happened. But of course, what Klein did was that he pulled all the kids just into one general classroom and he cut all the supports. Right? So I think that the question that we need to ask is what kind of level of support if we are going to truly have inclusion in education? Because folks, it's not inclusion to just have all kids together in one classroom. It is only inclusive if we are supporting all kids in the classroom. And so that is the conversation that we need to have. What does that support look like? Maybe you need 13 EAs. And if you need 13 EAs, we got to look at how we can make that happen.
She said it so much better than I did. That's why she's so brilliant. But that's exactly right. It's all about nuance and figuring out where or how to make sure every kid thrives. And you don't do it by pretending to have inclusion, but not giving people the supports they need to truly thrive.
Yeah. Naheed, we're hitting right about an hour here.
An hour 5? Wow.
Yeah, I know. Should we do?
Let's do a couple more.
Yeah, we'll do a couple more.
If you guys want to, if you guys have to leave, just leave. I don't need to tell you that. You're on YouTube. You can just leave.
You can literally go whenever.
you
Now,
can
they're
literally
in
go
their
whenever you want.
pajamas.
I am also in my pajamas. I wake up like this and I sleep like this, which is why I'm usually a little rumpled. But, why don't we keep going for a little bit and wrap up a few more questions, because I know there are great ones out there.
Yeah.
And by the way, I want to say to all of you, if you're wondering about the magic going on here, there's a lot of magic. But I want to say thank you to our colleagues, Will and Tommy in particular, who are scanning through all your comments, consolidating them sometimes, and popping them up on Amanda's magic screen so that we can get to as many questions as possible.
Yeah. All right, so next up we have Stephanie from Sherwood Park. Stephanie says, as a constituent of Sherwood Park and as a parent of a 6-year-old that's just starting in grade 1, I'm deeply concerned about the state of education here in Alberta. What are things we can do as parents to not only show support, but to actually change the trajectory? I feel like I'm on a runaway train with no brakes. It's getting to the point that my family is strongly considering leaving the province.
I thought the last 2 words would be private school.
Yeah.
Because that too is part of the goal here.
Yeah.
And, I believe the opposite, that we should make the public education system so great that it attracts people rather than it sends families away. Yeah. So we addressed this a little bit earlier in the program, but I'll just quickly say 2 things. Number 1 is don't stand for it. You deserve better. And we shouldn't assume that we can only get this because this is what the government gives us. So get loud. Get loud in supporting your teachers individually. Amanda gave a great example of just slip a note into the backpack to the teacher saying, we appreciate you. I love that. Just so that they know in these tough times, because they don't want to go on strike either, by the way, that they know that you've got their back. That makes a big difference. Get political. The school boards have been silenced by the provincial government. They've been intimidated into not talking about what's really going on. But you can do it. You can do it. Your parents' councils can do it. You can talk to your MLAs. You can talk to the Premier and the Minister. Copy Amanda on all those emails and me. You can phone your MLA's office and say this just isn't acceptable. But ultimately, folks, this government has proven over and over and over again that they just don't care enough about public education. But here's the thing. An election is coming. It could be this year, it could be next year. It'll certainly be by 2027 at the latest. And it is your opportunity to elect a better government. I hate saying that because I sound like such a politician. I am a politician.
Well,
but one of the things I've learned in this job is a lot of people think this conservative government is just inevitable and we're stuck with it.
No.
There are better choices, and we think we're a better choice. And we know that we're better together, so make your voice heard at the ballot box too. And there is an election in 45 days. In 45 days, you will have the chance to vote for your school board trustees, as well as for your mayors, reeves, and councillors. People don't pay attention to school board elections. Pay attention to the school board elections. There is a group of people who are affiliated with the old Take Back Alberta group who are trying to take over school boards across the province. Do not let them. Vote for great candidates in your area and make sure that we've got school boards that are standing up for parents, not standing up for Danielle Smith.
Yeah. All right, I think we've got time for one more.
Okay.
Some final thoughts. I really love this question. Mike from YouTube Live asked this. We know that we have a shortage here in Alberta of skilled trades workers. So he's asking, how will the NDP help people, encourage people to get into the trades?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you so much. We have to encourage everyone to strive to a great life. And there is a great life in the trades.
Yeah.
And for too long, we've devalued that. We've made the pathways towards getting a skilled trade complicated. We've made it difficult to figure out, do I go to NATE? Do I go to a union trading center? Do I get the same education? It's very, very hard to do. And we've been working already. I was thrilled to be endorsed by the Building Trades Association when I ran for leadership. And we've already been starting the conversations, even though we're not in government yet, hopefully, around how do we streamline the process? How do we get more young people? How do we get more young women in particular interested in the trades? How do we ensure that we get people through? There's huge attrition for people who start in most of the skilled trades before they finish. It's kind of an older system. It needs to be modernized in many ways. What I can tell you for sure is that government after government has paid lip service to this without really looking at structural changes involving the unions, involving the employers, involving the folks who really know the business to figure out how to do a better job here. And we need to do it. It's not for everybody. It's hard work. It's often outdoor work. And not everybody loves that, but there are a lot of folks who do and who will really thrive in that environment. And just saying, go into the skilled trades because you'll make a lot of money really young isn't doing it the way that it used to. So we need to be really thoughtful about how we create these pathways, streamline them, make them easier, expose kids to these opportunities much younger than they do. And a lot of the industry and a lot of the unions are really, really good at doing this. Last time I was visiting the electricians, they had high school students in there for a summer intensive program. And these are the sorts of things that we really need to focus in on. And it really does come from ensuring that every person finds a place where they can do well and thrive. And, you know, that sounds naive and optimistic, but we're Albertans, we're naive and optimistic. But it really is possible to do it. And I'll wrap this question on a more of a political note, which is we've heard a lot from the government about the importance of this, and they've thrown a few dollars here and there at training centers and so on. But ultimately, they haven't been taking it seriously, like so many things. They kind of do the minimum without getting really to the heart of the complex issues that face them. You know, at one point, they removed someone from the board of an organization that looks at all this, ostensibly because they supported me and the New Democrats. I mean, come on, stop playing politics, get the right people in place, and get the answers right. These are people's futures we're talking about, not just the future of the economy. And the good news is getting this right builds the economy and builds better futures for our kids. So we need to do it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Now, had I said we were going to wrap, but this is an Ask Me Anything, right? And we have had a number of questions come in, not education related. So I'm wondering if we could actually...
Yeah, let's do lightning round.
If we could finish out with what a lot of people are wondering about right now is AISH. So Laurel on Facebook asks, would you please address the UCP changes around AISH? That's a good summary of the types of questions that we're getting on this. People are concerned. People are worried, Naheed, about what's happening and what kind of impact this is going to have on their lives.
Listen, I'm a pretty even-keeled guy, as you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird for politics. I'm pretty calm most of the time. But this makes me furious. I'm so angry with what's going on here. And in fact, did you know we had a competing town hall? Minister Nixon was doing a similar one of these, except you couldn't ask him anything.
Of course not.
At 6 o'clock tonight, and I was just getting some of the feedback from it as I was coming in.
Yeah.
And it's a real problem. So let me explain a couple of things. So AISH stands for Assurance Income for the Severely Handicapped. By the way, I hate that name for many reasons. It's a little outdated.
A little old-fashioned.
But it is the program that primarily funds vulnerable, I shouldn't say vulnerable because they're not vulnerable. They can be very strong, but low-income people living with disabilities. It pays $1,900 a month total. So after many, many, many decades of lobbying and advocacy, the disability community convinced the federal government to give Canadians with disabilities a small monthly benefit, $200 a month. For someone living on $1,900 a month, a 10% increase, $200 a month, means so much. Means you don't have to be quite so scared at the till at the grocery store. Means once in a while you could go see the new Fantastic Four movie, right? It means dignity. And the Alberta government, uniquely among all governments in Canada, is clawing back the $200. So in essence, they're taking AISH from $1,900 to $1,700. At the same time, they're changing the guidelines on rents that AISH recipients get, so that most AISH recipients starting in January will pay far more in rent. So they're getting their benefits cut, they're paying more in rent, if they're living in subsidized housing, which many AISH recipients are, making life harder and harder and harder. Now, there's a third thing. And the third thing is they're creating a program called the Alberta Disability Benefit, ADAP. And it's still not entirely clear, though I think the minister did provide a bit of clarity on this. So it may well be that in 2026, all AISH recipients will move to ADAP. Yeah. ADAP pays $200 less again. So now we're $400 down.
Wow.
Okay, with the expectation that you can work. If you truly are unable to work, and that's a fine thing. People should be able to work without putting their benefits at risk. Yeah, but if you're unable to work, you have to reapply for AISH. You can't just go back. And that could take months or years. So basically what they're doing is they're assuming every single person on AISH is a fraudster. And starting with the assumption that people are wrong. It's the same as the girls having to prove their sex. Instead of treating people with dignity and rooting out whatever fraud there really is. Oh, one other thing. Sorry, one more. You have to apply for the Canada Disability Benefit or your AISH will be cut anyway. But to apply for the disability benefit means going through some hoops, getting a family doctor who has a family doctor to do an assessment. It costs about $200, and you can get reimbursed through various ways for that $200, but you got to come up with the $200 up front. Yeah. Now let's keep in mind, Amanda, you got a raise this year.
I did.
You got a pay raise, which I am not begrudging you. It was the first pay raise for MLAs in many, many years. But you also got a raise thanks to the UCP.
Yeah.
In your housing allowance.
Yeah, those guys have some fancy apartments. I've never managed to spend my whole housing allowance.
Me neither.
I live in
I don't get one, but good.
Teeny tiny little apartment.
So the UCP increased the housing allowance for MLAs who live outside of Edmonton, which is all UCP MLAs because they don't have any seats in Edmonton, to $2,200 a month. I shouldn't say it's all of them because I think the ones right around Edmonton might not get it.
You're right. You have to live a certain distance.
Yeah, 60 kilometers from the legislature or something.
It is the majority.
But nonetheless, $2,200 a month.
Just for rent.
Because the rents went up.
Yeah.
So they've increased their own rental to $2,200, and they're decreasing the amount AISH recipients get to spend on everything. So they've protected themselves from increases in rent, but not among the poorest people in the province. Yeah. It's just not right.
No.
And every single day, I hear from AISH recipients who are at the end of their rope. They don't know what to do. And the example of the couple that I met in Red Deer, I also hear from their parents a lot. I met a couple in Red Deer who's probably about my age, a little bit older. They had an adult son on AISH, and they've been trying for years to make him independent. So he lives on his own. But the mom still manages his budget. She buys his groceries, and she's worked it out so that he never spends more than $2 per meal. $2 breakfast, $2 lunch, $2 dinner.
Wow.
And she said, I'm getting older. Yeah. I might need care. I don't have anything.
Yeah.
And he is not yet fully independent. What is going to happen to him? And by the way, on $1,900, I can do it for $2 a meal. What am I supposed to do on $1,700? And that's the reality that people are living right now.
It's an impossible situation they're being put in. Well, I think that we have run out of time. Thank you really to everyone once again who submitted questions in advance, who joined us live here today. You really all showed up with some just really smart, thoughtful, interesting questions. It's been a real pleasure to share the time here with you, Naheed.
Thank you, Amanda.
So much for your honesty. For your passion. I love a blunt politician, I'll just say.
Well, thank you. So do I. That's why I like you so much.
Yeah.
Folks, one last little plug that I'll give you all, which is we did this tonight and we love doing it, but there are many, many, many ways to get engaged. One of the most common questions we got today is, how do I get more involved? And so I'm thrilled to have shared some ideas about getting involved on the education file. But this summer and now into the fall, we're doing a program that we call Better Together. And we are showing up all over the province. You have been at dog parks and community
Oh,
festivals.
yeah. I was at a dog park a couple weeks ago.
And how many doors have you knocked on this summer?
I couldn't even tell you how many. Hundreds.
No, thousands. I've seen your numbers.
I love talking to my neighbors. It is my favorite part of this job.
So we're showing up on your doorstep in your dog park, at your community festivals. But we also have a series of town halls. I don't like calling them town halls. I call them community gatherings. Yeah. They're not like the town halls that those other guys are doing where you get a mic and say awful things and the premier nods, right? These are town halls where we get you talking to your neighbors, thinking about solutions, working with us. People have loved them. And we have a whole series of them coming up in Calgary, in Airdrie, in Okotoks, in Canmore, that's southern Alberta, in Sherwood Park, in Edmonton, in Spruce Grove, and I'm not supposed to tell you, but there's going to be one in Grand Prairie. So
nice. Wow.
Go to bettertogethersummer.ca. You can sign up for these things, and we would love to see you there. If you can't make it in person, we'll have more online opportunities, but also there's an opportunity to give us your thoughts online on a number of things around separation, around the province in general. And you can download a really great tool. We're calling it the Better Together Passport. And it is an opportunity for you to have some talking points around why separatism doesn't make sense. But you can share that with your neighbors and create more activists. So that's bettertogethersummer.ca. And I want to say a special thank you. I got such great colleagues, but one of my very favorites was here with me tonight, our Shadow Minister of Education, a mom, an activist, a nerd.
A little bit.
With a business degree.
A book nerd, certainly.
With a business degree, and your amazing MLA for Calgary Beddington, and our Shadow Minister of Education, Amanda Chapman. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Naheed. Good night, everyone.
Good night.